Hello, I'm novelist Laura Shiro, and what follows is an hour-long conversation with a Palestinian-born man who supports Israel and the Jewish people in the diaspora. What? What? A Palestinian-born man? I thought all Palestinians hated the Jews. Well, if you're curious, you'll have to stay tuned and listen and watch the two of us have a very interesting and enjoyable conversation. If you like my channel, please consider subscribing. It's free. Thank you. Hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm all right today. How are you?
I'm well, and I was looking forward to talking to you this evening. For me, this evening, it's afternoon for you, I presume.
It is afternoon for me in Chicago, and it is the evening in Glasgow for you. And you, I'm told, are a Palestinian-born man, and you support Israel and the Jewish people. Tell me about that. What's that all about?
Well, I was born in Palestine while it was the Mandate of Palestine and before Israel was established in 1948. And I think the interesting thing is that we have a peace advocacy stall in Glasgow city centre, and I often tell people that I was born a Palestinian, and they look at me as if I'm crazy, and they say, "But you're not an Arab, are you?" And I say, "No, I'm Jewish." And in fact, during the days of the Mandate, it was the Jews who were called Palestinians because the Arabs didn't want to be called Palestinians, they wanted to be called Arabs, and they thought Palestinian was a derogatory term. So
Why,
if you look
why
at
is
many
that?
derogatories, it's not a nice, a sort of unpleasant, um, almost to be ashamed of term. And as you probably know, all the Palestinian entities that existed during the Mandate, such as the Palestinian Bank became Bank Leumi of Israel, the Palestinian Post newspaper became the Jerusalem Post, the Palestine football team became, which was full of Jewish players, was a Jewish football team. So everything called Palestinian was actually eventually Israeli and not an Arab entity. So the Palestinians were the Jews, and I was one of those Jews. But at 2 years old, I became an Israeli.
So you were born in 1946 and
Correct.
You were a Palestinian child for 2 years then.
That's correct. Yes.
And then the area of land that you lived on as a child, a Palestinian child, became Israel and you became an Israeli child.
Yes. So I was born in Tel Aviv. And obviously, when the state was established, Tel Aviv was the largest city in Israel, and it still is the largest city in Israel. So I transitioned from being a Palestinian to Israel. Like my father, for example, had a Palestinian passport because that's all you could get when you lived in Palestine. And it was only after 1948 that the state was established and people living in that state were given, when they needed one, they needed an Israeli passport, not a Palestinian passport. So that's the transition that most of the Jews and Arabs as well, because many Arabs, as you know, didn't flee Palestine at the beginning of the war in 1948. So many of the Arabs stayed. And in fact, the 2 million Arabs that now live in Israel are all descendants of those Arabs that didn't fly away in 1948.
And that's a question I used to believe, because I come from the left, I used to believe that Israel drove all the Palestinians out of what had become Israel. But that isn't really the case from what I now know. but I don't know much of the history of what really happened at that point when so many Palestinians left, but a certain percentage of Palestinians, or Arabs, I should say, stayed.
Exactly. Arabs is the right word. Now, you know that in every conflict in the world, when a war starts, people flee. They run away to a safer place. And as they've just done in Ukraine, for example, 3 million Ukrainians are now living in Poland. And the same thing happened in 1948 in Palestine when the war started, when 5 Arab countries attacked what was going to be Israel. Many of the Arabs fled, and also the Arab government said to them, just leave just now, and when we kill all the Jews,
Yeah.
you'll be able to come back and live in Palestine. But as we know, that's not what happened, that Israel won that war. And because of that, those who fled could not come back. But on the other hand, the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of Arabs that stayed in what became Israel are the people that are there now, the Israeli Arabs, of which there are 2 million.
Mm-hmm.
And some of whom you probably know are in the government. So, people talk about an apartheid state, which maybe we can touch on later. But the important point is, how are the 2 million Arabs in Israel? These are the people, the descendants of those Arabs who did not decide to flee in 1948.
That didn't do what the 5 Arab countries who had invaded Israel either on the same day or the day after Israel became a sovereign country. Those Arabs refused to leave. A lot of Arabs left and went to Arab Muslim countries, but a certain percentage, a few 100,000, stayed. And the
Yes,
people.
and that population has grown. So today, 20% of the people living in Israel are Arabs.
So back to the early part of your story. You are a man who was born in Palestine, and then you became an Israeli citizen when you were 2 years old. So how did you wind up in Palestine, Israel? The history of your
Oh,
parents.
so that's quite interesting. My father came from Hungary, and he came to what was Palestine in the 1930s. He came on his own. His family was left in Hungary, he had a very large family. And my mother came from Poland, and she came to Palestine with her parents and 3 sisters. So they both arrived in Palestine quite separately, but they met in Palestine and they fell in love and they got married. And I and my brother are the result of that.
And you are the older brother?
I am the older by 3 years. So he never had the chance to be Palestinian because by the time he was born, it was 1949. And by then, the state of Israel existed. So he didn't have the pleasure of transitioning from being a Palestinian to an Israeli.
Okay. And then you have a Scottish accent. So how did you get from Israel? At what age, and why and how did you cross the ocean and wind up in Glasgow?
Well, as I said, my father came from Hungary and he came to Palestine by himself. And his family, he had 7 siblings and parents and grandparents and uncles who all stayed in Hungary, and all of them were killed in the Holocaust.
Yes.
And so he obviously didn't really know what happened to them because in those days we didn't have internet, we didn't have Zoom that we can find out what's going on. And then many years later, in the 1950s, my father somehow discovered that one of his brothers actually survived the war and ended up living in Glasgow. I don't know how he found out, but he did. And he decided to take his family, which was my mother and my brother and I, to Glasgow to see his brother, who he thought had died in the war. And it was a wonderful reunion. And my father decided to stay in Glasgow with his brother. And the good story that I tell people is that in those days, air travel was very expensive, so we came by boat from Haifa to Marseille in France, and from France we came to Glasgow, and my brother and I didn't speak any English because we were just young kids, and so we went for special English lessons. And one of the things I used to say to people, which people laughed at, and I didn't know why they were laughing, because they were saying to me, "How did you get to Scotland?" And I said, "I came on a sheep."
Mm-hmm.
And they thought that was quite funny, and I didn't know why until I realized that I was using the wrong pronunciation for that word. And instead of saying ship, I said sheep, and they found it quite amusing.
It was a farm animal. You came on a farm animal.
Correct.
So, your father found out that one of his brothers had survived the Holocaust. Does he know where the rest of his siblings, what concentration camps they wound up in, where they were murdered?
We have quite a lot of information about what happened to most of his family. Most of them were actually killed in Auschwitz. Um, and actually, quite amazingly, I have one cousin uh, who's still alive, first cousin who's still alive. She's 96 or something, and she lives in Rome, in Italy, and she's a very famous author, and she writes a lot of books in Italian because she's been in Italy a long time. And she also is very busy with Holocaust education. And 3 or 4 years ago, there was a knock at her door, and the Pope Francis, was standing there. He came to visit her to thank her for all the work she'd been doing on Holocaust education. And it was a big, big story and lots of photographs of the Pope giving my cousin a hug, which he doesn't do very often with women.
I would
So
imagine not.
she's a, she's a very special person.
So my the family, the part of my family, my Jewish family, my mother was Jewish, that came here, they had ongoing um, correspondence with the family that were left in that stayed behind in the Ukraine. And during the war, World War II, um, correspondence completely stopped. And at the end of the war, my grandfather, and my mother tells the story, she was a young woman. He got a letter. My grandfather got a letter saying that his his father and his niece were murdered at Babi Yar.
Right.
That
And
stays
that's
with you.
a terrible kind of letter to get at any time, isn't it?
And I know my mother told me my grandfather died when I was a baby, but she told me that he cried and cried. Um, it stays with you.
Well, if I think if you're a Jewish person and you find out that all your family was wiped out because they were Jewish, how could it not stay with you? Even to this day, we talk about the Holocaust and what happened in the Holocaust and how we are very upset and angry when people deny that the Holocaust ever took place. So it's something that worries me because young kids these days in school don't know very much about the Holocaust. And the chances are that in 20 or 30 years' time, the whole story might disappear.
It could it could disappear. I I watched some footage clips of you on YouTube, and there's this one that really impressed me. Um, Someone was filming you, and the back of you, and you were walking away. And
Right?
oh, you're looking for it?
No, no, what I'm doing is my phone just said the battery is low, so I'm just going to charge it so
Okay.
we don't lose contact. So that's all it is. Can you see me? I'm just going to arrange it so you can see me better.
Okay.
There we go. Okay, that's fine.
So in this clip, that's one of my first introductions to you after the editor of the Journal of Contemporary, the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Contemporary Anti-Semitism told me about you. And I looked you up. And there's just this one clip. I looked at many clips, but of the back of you walking away from someone who's following you, taunting you
Yes.
as a whatever he said. It was a man, dirty Zionist, filthy, whatever it was. And you turned around at one point and just smiled at him and then walked away. I think he said,
Well,
what are you running? Are you afraid of me? Are you running away? And you turned around and you just, and then you walked away. And I thought, okay, I want to meet Sammy Stein.
thank you. So, because we've been on the street in Glasgow for over 10 years, it's 10 years since we've had our peace advocacy stall. It's not a recent thing. Some people come to the stall and they think we started it on October, following October 7th, but that's not the case. We started it in 2015, and we've had lots of experiences with people coming to the stall and being very insulting and obnoxious and rude. And I find that the best way to treat them is to smile at them, because they expect you to get very angry and respond to their anger, but they don't expect that instead of that, you would be smiling, and they get very upset because they're not getting the kind of reaction that they want. And that's the main reason I do that. I smile at them, and usually they just leave.
Well, I think they expect us to get either angry or afraid. And so
That's right.
when you turn around and you face them and you smile, there are many things that you're really doing, and I won't say them on this recording. But I thought, okay, I want to talk with this man. So what brought you to the point, I'm skipping around here, forgive me for that.
Okay.
What what brought you to the point where you organized or co-organized the Glasgow Friends of Israel? What there was a, you know, I'm friends with the editor of the Journal of Contemporary Anti-Semitism, and I never asked her what made her want to start this journal. I think it's been in existence 6 or 7 years, something like that. So I'm what was the impetus for your wanting to start this organization? What was it, basically 10 years ago?
Well, you may remember that in 2014, there was also a war in Gaza, just like there is at the moment. And just like now, most of the media was very anti-Israel, whether it was the television or the newspapers or the radio, they were very, very anti-Israel.
Yeah.
And there were actually a number of Friends of Israel groups in Scotland, and they were started by a non-Jewish person who said that he had a heart for Israel, and that's why he started the groups. And after he started a group in Edinburgh, we met at that event, and he said, "Would you like to start a group in Glasgow to call Glasgow Friends of Israel?" And as I say, because Israel was going through a really difficult time in the general media, we thought that would be a good thing to do. And one of the main things that we felt we had to do was have a street stall, which meant we could speak to people all the time in the streets of Glasgow and meet the ordinary people who didn't know very much about what was going on. And our role was to try and explain to them what's happened, why it's happened. We gave them material. We've got lots of leaflets and brochures and booklets, and we give that. And it was all an attempt to try and balance out the anti-Israel propaganda that was going on all over the world, of course, in those days, just like it's happening now. And we were able and have still been able to talk to hundreds and hundreds of people who come by the stall and talk to us about what's happening in the Middle East at the moment. And we've been doing that for 10 years.
I mentioned that I grew up in a left-wing family, and my mother, who was a good woman, who didn't understand the history of Israel, did not understand the history of the Mizrahi Jews. There was a lot she didn't understand. And when I was a young woman, she joined an organization called the Palestine Human Rights Campaign. And shortly after she joined, I got a divorce and came back to Chicago with my young son. And I was always uncomfortable with her saying that Israelis were all bad and Zionism was all bad, and the Palestinians were pure good people. It just didn't seem rational to me. It seemed unfair. And about 17 years ago, because of that, I just didn't want to talk about it. I was still very critical of Israel, but I felt that Israel had the right to exist, and I just didn't like the harsh condemnation of the Israeli people.
When was that, Laura? What year was
Okay,
that?
well, I was a young woman, so this would have been maybe 45 years ago. And then, so she died about 30 years ago, my mother. And at some point, there was an organization, it doesn't exist anymore in Chicago, called Not in My Name. And it was
Right.
a bunch of Jews, left-wing Jews, who were critical of Israel, but their criticism was because they wanted Israel to do better so that Israel wouldn't get in trouble and be slaughtered. That's really the underlying reason. So I looked them up about 17 years ago, 17 or 18 years ago, and I couldn't find them. They were listed, but when I called, I wanted to find out if there was anything I could get involved with, because I felt this need to both criticize Israel and protect Israel. And I wound up, I knew that there was some sort of vigil every Sunday in a downtown park-like, very pretty area of Chicago. And I just went one Sunday in the summer, 17 years ago. And they had changed, the Not in My Name people had merged just a few months earlier with an organization I'd never heard of, Jewish Voice for Peace. So
Right.
I started coming to the vigils. And I would hold up this sign saying, "This Jew says no to the occupation," stuff like that. I didn't know what the hell I was talking about. I was arrogant, you know.
Young and arrogant.
I'm sorry.
Young and arrogant.
I wasn't that young, but thank you. That's very kind of you to suggest that 17 years ago I was young. But anyway, but what happened was I started, sometimes Muslims in hijabs or chadors would show up with their megaphones and start screaming, "Kill the Jews." And there I was with my little idealistic, naive sign, "This Jew says no to Israeli occupation." And I'd have women standing next to me waving a Palestinian
Shouting at you.
flag and flapping me in the face deliberately. In fact, I wrote about it, and I wrote a short story called "The Nomadic Jew at the Palestine Human Rights Rally," which was satire, but it was based on the 8 or 9 months I was in this organization. And I would go, and there would be two or three other people that would go to the monthly meetings we had, and I would raise my concern over the blatant anti-Semitism. And this is 17 years ago. And it turns out that the leader of the local organization was a close friend, and I think actually was employed by Ali Abu Nima, who is the whatever he is, the director
Yeah.
of the Electronic Intifada. And his response was, well,
Intifada,
it's not.
yeah.
I'm sorry, say that again.
No, I agree. I said intifada, like you said intifada, yeah.
Yeah. It turns out that
And on you go, Laura, on you go.
hold on a minute. Take me a moment to get it back. Oh, he
So
would
while you're thinking about
the
that,
leader
it's
in the meeting would
interesting.
say, he would say, well, I'll talk to Ali about it, and he'll talk to the other Arabs, and they'll stop. And why can't you just say something publicly? Why, so at some point, I don't know what was, there was a final straw, but there were several. I kept trying to think I could get these Jews to stand up for the fact that they were Jewish, They didn't want to have they didn't want to have a Seder because that would be insulting to the Muslims, the people in this
Yes.
Jewish Force for Peace. So at some point I'd had it. And by that point, at some point later on, I was introduced to Lynn Julius, who is an Iraqi
Oh,
Jew,
yes.
and I began
Yes, we know
reading.
her.
I'm sorry,
I
say
said,
that
we
again.
know her.
You know her.
We know
Yeah.
Lynn. We know Lynn, yes.
Well, I began reading her.
Oh, a book.
Yeah. Well, I didn't read
She
her
wrote
book.
a she
I
wrote a
read
book.
she has these daily blogs, and um, I just started consuming them. I just realized there was so much I didn't know. Um, so, I'm going off on a tangent, and I apologize a little bit, but I was already halfway there. I had already seen the most horrible Jew hatred from these people we were supposed to be allied to. Um, but I was already halfway there. But I wonder, I ask myself all the time, and it's the reason I set up this channel. What will it take for us to be able to? I was an accident in a way that I changed, that I became a Zionist. And even now, when I say I'm a Zionist, I feel this little queasiness inside, like I've done something wrong by saying that. Because I was all my life, I've heard what terrible people the Zionists were. So what do we do? How do we change people's minds that aren't already halfway there?
The problem is that people who criticize Zionists don't really know what a Zionist is,
Yeah.
and they don't know what Zionism is. So when I ask people, what do you think a Zionist is? I get lots of different answers, but none of them are correct. Because as you know, a Zionist is someone who believes that the Jewish people should have a homeland in Israel. That's all it means. It doesn't mean any more than that. It doesn't refer to what borders it should have. It doesn't talk about what enemies it's got. It doesn't talk about anything else apart from the right of the Jewish people to have a home. And what I do, and that's something you can sometimes do as well, you ask people if they believe in a two-state solution. And most people say, of course, I believe in a two-state solution.
Mhm.
And you say to them, well, if that's the case, you are a Zionist. Because by believing in a two-state solution, you support the right of the Jewish people to have their own state, side by side with the Palestinian state. But you still agree that the Jews should have their own state, and that is all Zionism is about. So if you believe in a two-state solution, by definition, you are a Zionist.
And then do these people you say this to, do they become very confused and flustered? And
Of course, then they start arguing about what they believe and don't believe. But you say to them, you just look up any definition of Zionism or a Zionist, and you will see that's all it means. And if you believe in a two-state solution, which you say you do, by definition, you are a Zionist. Now, I wrote an article recently about the Scottish government, because the Scottish government is very anti-Israel. But at the same time, the Scottish government's policy towards the Middle East is that they support a two-state solution. Now, some of them are so horrible, I think they are verging on anti-Semitism. So they are just about anti-Semites, but because they agree with the two-state solution, they're also Zionists. So I've written an article to say, how is it possible that the members of the Scottish government are both anti-Semites and Zionists at the same time? And that is very confusing for them, and it creates lots of conversation. I can send you the article to have a
yes,
look at.
please do.
I will do.
I was just thinking, they would then, if they were going to defend themselves, they would have to say, well, no, I'm not a Zionist. Well, then where do you want the Jews to go?
Of course, no, but if the person believes in a two-state solution, by definition, that person is a Zionist, because that's all Zionism is. A Jewish state for the Jewish people, and a two-state solution provides a Jewish state for the Jewish people.
And that's what I'm going to start saying to people from
Yes.
now on. I'm going to
Yeah, I
use
say that to lots of people, and many of them sort of stop talking and start thinking, and they don't know what to say next because they realize that it's true. But they can't accept that after being such a hater of Zionism, that they could actually, by definition, also be a Zionist.
Except what they often are basically haters of Jews.
They are haters of Jews. Of course they are, because they're anti-Semite. That's what they are. But they wouldn't want to admit that. So they just say, I only hate Zionists. But Zionism and Judaism are very closely aligned, as you know. I mean, everything we do in our religion as a religious prayer, we often talk about Jerusalem, which is actually Zion, and we pray to Zion and we say next year in Jerusalem and so on. So our Zionism is part of our religion. So you cannot be anti-Zionist but no anti-Semite. By definition, you're both. That's another article I've written, which I can send you.
Yes, please do. I'll put them in, I'll link them.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I haven't written a book. I know you said you thought I'd written a book. I haven't written any books, but I've written many, many, many articles that have been published. And I think that's better because a new thing comes out every couple of weeks. I was writing one today for my next article, and I get lots of feedback from that, and that's great.
Well, I hope to be in the UK next summer.
Good.
Fingers crossed. And I have a good friend who has invited me to stay in Glasgow. And if I get there, I would like to be able to come and be with you guys, all of you, on is it on Saturday, every Saturday?
Every Saturday between 11 and 3 o'clock. We're there for 4 hours, regardless of the weather. We go every Saturday, even if the weather is really bad, we go, but we don't necessarily stay 4 hours because we want to be able to say that we've been there every Saturday.
So you come every Saturday to sunny Glasgow?
Correct. And you'd be very welcome to join us.
I would be thrilled. In some ways, it would be a healing thing for me after having spent 8 or 9 months with this racist Jew-hating group, self-loathing group, Jewish Voice for Peace. And I've never made a I've only recently started making a public statement about it. I lived with the embarrassment and shame of it for a long time, but I would like to do that. Is there anything else you would like to say while we are here together?
You wanted to talk about the trial?
Oh, yes, that's right. Yeah, now I heard about this from the editor of the Journal of Contemporary Anti-Semitism, that there's a trial. I don't know much about it. Something,
Well,
a man had threatened you or gotten abusive with you and he was arrested. I don't know if I'm
yes.
being
So
accurate.
now I will tell you the story. So a year after October the 7th, we held a vigil for the hostages. And this was a very large event out in the open air in Glasgow. And we had about 200 or 300 people attending. Now, at the same time, there is this horrible, horrible group of anti-Israel people, and they call themselves pro-Palestinian, but actually they're not pro-Palestinian, they're anti-Israel. And they decided to have a demo against our vigil. And you would think that most decent people would recognize that this is not a political event. This is one to honor and respect and call for the release of the hostages. And there were lots of different speakers, including rabbis, and there were prayers and there were songs. So it was not political at all. And yet they decided that they were going to demonstrate against that event. And this particular man, who is the leader of an obnoxious anti-Semitic group called Scottish Palestine Solidarity Campaign, he used a very, very, very loud public address system that drowned out our event. And he called us things like rats and swines and genocide supporters. And as you can imagine, calling Jewish people rats is reminiscent of what the Nazis used to do. And that's how they justified killing Jews, by comparing them to vermin. And so he was arrested and he has been charged with a sort of breach of the peace type of charge, but he's also got something called a racist aggravation, which means as part of his charge, he's accused of using racist language against people. And so the trial started a few months ago, but it's a very slow process. And we have had 5 full days of the trial, and there have been lots of different witnesses. And we had hoped that the trial would be finished by now. And in fact, it has finished, but we still haven't had the verdict from the judge and also what the sentence is going to be. So the witnesses for the prosecution explained why they felt that what this man was saying was anti-Semitic. There was also a police officer who was involved in arresting him, explaining why he was arrested. And then this guy had 2 defense witnesses, which were absolutely useless. And so we are very hopeful that he will be found guilty of a racist crime, because although he's been found guilty in the past of many crimes, he's never been found guilty of a racial crime. And he says he's only anti-Zionist, he's not a racist. And we hope that he will be found guilty of racism, because then we will be able to call him a convicted racist.
Good.
And on the 28th of October, we're all going back to court, where the judge will announce her verdict and her sentence. So we can always talk again after the 28th of October, where I'll be able to give you an update. And I pray and I cross my fingers that he will be found guilty of a racist crime. Now, I've also got a case against him, which was supposed to be in court, but was adjourned, where I also believe he was racist in his language towards me, and I have it all on the video. And that's going to be starting on the 22nd of December this year. So there's going to be another case against him where hopefully he will be found guilty of a racist crime. And 2 in 1 year would be fantastic. So that's the background.
And when the first verdict comes in on the 28th, sometime after that, you and I can have another conversation. I was
Of course we can.
Yes, I was thinking as you were describing. So first of all, my first thought was, well, Sammy, you mean we're not rats? We're not rodents? We're human beings? That was my first thought.
I'm sure you and I, that's a rhetorical question, I'm sure.
And then I thought about, I saw this in a clip just in the last week before the last hostages were living hostages were released by the terrorist organization Hamas, Israeli hostages. That when people were putting up the yellow ribbons all throughout a neighborhood in London, within an hour, someone came up and was ripping them all down.
There was a woman, it's been on video, there was a woman
Yes.
who went around taking them down. Now she is supposed to be Jewish, would you believe?
Yeah, sure.
And her husband's a Palestinian.
Right.
But it's probably someone like your old friends in Voice for Peace, or whatever they were called, who is very anti-Zionist or anti-Israel. And that was her way of showing what she's really about. And that's even if you disagree with Israel, you can't possibly not be able to feel really, really, really sorry for the families and for the hostages who were in tunnels for 2 years. It's just dreadful. You have to be a really horrible individual to be doing that, which is what she was doing.
I personally have a theory. This is my own personal theory, that to be have that kind of hatred means that you're a psychopath. That's just my opinion. I don't have anything. I'm not a psychologist. There was one other thing I wanted to ask you about, because I don't know a lot about it. I'm a Yank and I've never been to the UK. I've not been to Birmingham, and I'm not a sports fan.
Okay.
But what is it? The Israeli Maccabi?
Yes.
Is this for football? Is it a football?
Yes. This is a game for a European competition.
Mm-hmm.
And for some strange geographic reason, Israel is included in Europe, and Israel plays in that competition, and they've been drawn against a football side that plays in Birmingham. Birmingham is a very, very, very Muslim area, and there are Muslim people in all sorts of different positions. And one of them, he's a member of an organization or a body called the Safety Advisory Group, something like that. And they look at public events and they decide if it's safe to hold that event. And this Muslim somehow was able to persuade this group to exclude the Maccabi fans because he said that they will cause violence in Birmingham. This is following a similar situation that happened in Amsterdam a few months ago, where there was a bit of violence between the Maccabi fans and the Dutch fans. And so they decided they were going to use that against the Maccabi fans. Now, until yesterday, it looked as if that decision was going to be overturned because the Prime Minister of the UK, he said that was the wrong decision. The complicating factor is that yesterday there was a game of football in Tel Aviv between Maccabi Tel Aviv and Hapoel Tel Aviv, and the fans began to riot, and the game was cancelled. So today, a lot of people are using that as an example to justify why the fans of Maccabi can't be here, because not only are they going to be violent in Birmingham, they were also violent in Tel Aviv.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to see how that turns out. There's going to be more arguments about it.
Yeah, and then this again, a lot of people who watch this channel might not know of this British working class British journalist, Tommy Robinson.
Yes.
He is going to show up at this event wearing, a pro Maccabi Israel shirt, and he's bringing a lot of people with him, Jews and non-Jews, and it looks like he could get a few hundred, maybe even a few thousand people to come, and it would be very interesting to see how that plays out.
Well, Tommy Robinson is a well-known agitator, let's say, and he's very right-wing and he's very pro-Israel. And I don't know if you know, he's just been to Israel. He was invited by a member of parliament of the Knesset to Israel, and he went over. And there's been lots of publicity about it and lots of films about it. And of course, people here are saying Robinson is a very, very bad guy. And the fact that Israel has invited him to visit just shows how racist Israel as a country is, because he's considered to be a bit of a racist. Now, I don't believe he is, but as you know, in politics, people have labels put on them by their opposition. And of course, that's happening in the US a lot between the right wing and the left wing. And so he's a very strong advocate for Israel. And not long ago, he organized a public meeting where over 100,000 people turned up to support what he was claiming, which is he's against what's called illegal immigration in the UK. There's a lot of illegal immigration, a bit like in the US, of all the immigration you get from Mexico and so on. So he has been labeled as a racist, but he stands up for what he believes in. And you're right, he will be going to Birmingham, but I hope that the Israeli fans are also there and that they're not going to be excluded from the match.
Well, he's inviting a lot of Israeli fans to come with him. And I've watched him. I mean, I've listened to a lot of the interviews. He's done it just in the last week, and he says that he's not right wing.
Well, everybody gets labeled with something from a political perspective. So I think he's probably saying he's not extreme right, because everybody that people don't like are called extreme right. And he's saying it's not extreme, it's just right wing. I mean, being right wing is no big deal. I mean, the Republicans in the US are right wing, the same as the Conservative Party in the UK is right wing. And he's saying, I'm no more right than the Conservatives. I'm certainly not extreme, and there's nothing wrong with being right wing.
Well, I agree with you. I was in the American Civil Rights Movement, and I've been called a racist.
In what way?
Well, I was called whenever there's a disagreement, a political disagreement, and basically this has been going on for 50, 70 years. Whenever there's a political disagreement where you're disagreeing with a Black person, you can be accused of being a racist, but I've also been accused of being an anti-Arab racist, or because I'm deeply uncomfortable with Islam. I've been called a racist. I was called a racist today on Facebook for saying I'm uncomfortable with Islam.
Let me tell you a story. Every year there is a march in Glasgow, which is called Stand Up to Racism. And it's all about, obviously, opposing racism. And people from my organization, including me, we try and participate in that march because we are obviously against racism in general and anti-Semitism in particular. Now, there are people who say that we are Zionists, and by definition, Zionists are racists, and you cannot have racists participating in an anti-racism march. And they try and block us from attending the march. And sometimes they do it with violence or with any physical attempts to stop us marching. So anybody in the world could be called a racist, regardless of who they are and what they do, because there's always going to be some racist, even though, of course, they're not racist. And that's probably the situation that is applying to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that maybe our time is about
So to some extent, sometimes it's almost a compliment. Oh,
I consider it a compliment
so
when
say
that
that again.
woman earlier today, when that woman called me a racist on Facebook. First of all, I blocked her, and I considered it a compliment because she couldn't address the issues that I wrote,
Yes.
that I brought up. So she just called me the dirtiest name she could think of. So I thought I was doing a good job. I hate when that happens, but I blocked her immediately. So
I think people I think people are showing their inadequacy when they're calling someone a racist because they can't really express anything meaningful to criticize that person. So it's easy just to put a label on them, whether it's racist or something else. It's just a sign that these people are actually unable to express themselves properly.
yes, I agree. I agree. Well, Sammy, is there anything else that you wanted to share with the people who will watch this?
Well, we have a very busy social media platform for Glasgow Friends of Israel. We've got a very, very popular Facebook page. We have over 10,000 followers. And if people that are watching this are Facebook users, I would like them to come onto our Facebook page, which is called Glasgow Friends of Israel, and have a look at what we do as an organization. And I think that will lift their heart to see the kind of things we're doing. I would like them to follow us and to support us because we'd like to get as much support as possible. And we already have supporters from Israel and from America and from Australia and from all over the world. And I would welcome anybody that can join our Facebook page, no matter where they are. And if they're watching this interview, please come onto Glasgow Friends of Israel Facebook page and let us know you're there, and we'll be very welcoming to you. And I hope you stay for a long time.
And I'll link the organization, the Facebook in the comments. I'll link it
Yes.
along with all the other things. Thank you so much for spending an hour with me.
So let me just say, not at all, it's been an absolute pleasure. We have two Facebook pages. One is a public Facebook page, and one is a Facebook page just for friends. So if you would like to join our private page, just put in a request to be a friend. And it's usually my wife, Vicky, who attends to that. And we would love to make connection with as many people as possible, especially in the US.
Okay. Well, I thank you. I wish you a good evening. And
Thank you.
I'm going to go make myself some lunch.
Oh, how nice. Enjoy your lunch. And hopefully, I will keep you in touch with what's happening. And once we get the verdict for the trial, I will let you know. And then we can work out what we might want to do next.
Sounds like a good idea. Bye-bye. For those of you who made it all the way to the end of our conversation, in the below the video, I have linked to some of Sammy Stein's articles, as well as a link to the Journal of Contemporary Anti-Semitism and to Lynn Julius's book, Uprooted, and to her blog, Point of No Return. Lynn Julius is an Iraqi Jew, and her book and her blog are all about Mizrahi Jews being expelled or driven out and abused in Muslim countries, Arab countries, and Iran. And I've also linked to my short story, which is called The Nomadic Jew at the Palestine Human Rights Rally. It's a short story, it's a satire. I think it's funny, and it's only 99 cents. Thanks for listening.